Thank you,
Would you
Mr. Chair.
stand? What?
Okay, Clerk Gumow, can you please call the roll, because I don't believe we have any agenda adjustments this evening. Is that correct? Okay, Clerk Gumow, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lindmark. Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McDonald. Mr. Neighbors. Mrs. Red.
Present.
Mr. Salgado.
Present.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Webster. Mr. Westcott. Mr. Arena. Mr. Village.
Here.
Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita.
Here.
Mrs. Crosby. Ms. Sellers. Ms. Sellers. Mr. Girl.
Present.
Mrs. Gorel.
Present.
Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Chairman, that is 18 present and 2 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Gumow. We have a quorum this evening. I will move to number 5 under awards, presentations, public hearings, and public participation. So I would kindly ask Sheriff Caruana to come forward, please. Okay, thank you, Sheriff. I'm going to read a letter first that was written by the family of these 2 deputies, Ryan Fish, Wes Gaines. This goes to you. Words cannot come nearly close enough to express our most sincere gratitude to the extreme extent you both went of risking your own lives to rescue our family member from a house fire this past week. Knowing that you both were there for him during such a tragic situation was incredibly comforting. Seeing the body cam footage was emotionally intense for us to watch. We are in complete awe of the hard work and dedication shown to a complete stranger. Even though we all know the role of a police officer is to protect and serve the members of their community, I don't think anyone really understands the full extent of that meaning until they see footage such as this. You all are true godsend to our family in this community. Saying thank you does not come anywhere close to what you all deserve. We are so blessed to have you all serving in such a selfless and humble career path, to be there for us when we in our most vulnerable times in life truly needed you. It's truly reassuring to know if we are ever in need, the heroes in blue are standing by waiting for our anxiety-filled call for help. They sprung into action, putting us ahead of themselves. They rescue us so they rescue us so that we are given another day to live, even if it means risking not seeing another one of their own. We love you all and will ever be forever grateful for the wonderful act of kindness and humility. With hearts full of gratitude, the family of Jack Nelson. Sheriff Caruana, can you please present?
Thanks, Chairman. And it's nice seeing everybody, especially with the COVID situation. Here's a situation that occurred. It's a accommodation for a life-saving individual, and I'm very, very happy to be able to present this. We have a great department from the corrections to 911 to the law enforcement side, then to the collection side, and for also creating into the process. Very, very, very professional. Well done. Here's the situation. It was on February 16th, 2021. Deputy Gantz and Deputy Ryan Fish responded to call at 7851 Kelly Road in response to a male subject calling 911 and stating that his residence was filled with smoke and was unable to exit the residence. Upon their arrival at the residence, they located an unlocked door and opened it. When they opened the door, they observed a large amount of smoke inside the residence. Deputy Gantz called out for anybody inside of the residence and received an answer from the residence, an 83-year-old male. The subject was unable to walk to Deputy Gantz. Due to the heavy smoke inside of the residence, Deputy Gantz crawled through the residence and constantly called out to the subject to try and locate him. Deputy Gantz was able to locate the subject, and dragged him through the residence to Deputy Fish and the other assistant officers as they continued to constantly stayed in contact with Deputy Gantz so he could find his way out of the residence. Shortly after the subject was removed from the residence, flames were observed in the basement of the residence. One pursued ambulance arrived on the scene and treated the subject and transported him to St. Anthony's Hospital where he was treated for smoke inhalation. Deputy Fish was treated at the scene by ambulance for a cut on his left hand that was caused by breaking the window out of the residence to provide an alternate route of escape if needed. Deputy Gantz was also seen by medical personnel at the scene. Deputy Gantz and Deputy Fish applied their training and performed their duties in an outstanding manner. The quick response actions clearly saved the life of the subject as smoke was quickly filling the residence. They each went above and beyond their call of duty, and I want to thank them for their outstanding efforts. If anybody knows anything about the fire service, which we don't as cops, you open up the door with a back door, and they didn't worry about that. They could have been blown off the porch, easily gotten themselves killed. They didn't think about it. They didn't worry about it. Deputy Fish, you could see him breaking out on the body cam, the window to try gain entry. Deputy Gantz went in there, crawled on his hands and knees to where he was located. It was filled with smoke. He could easily get lost if brought in there and perish from smoke inhalation. He got Deputy Fish again cut his hand. So they went above and beyond the call of duty, and you could see in the body cams. By the way, I do want to thank you for proving the body cams, just proving truthful as far as showing the good efforts of what we're doing out there for the community. I'd like to present these awards. Deputy Gantz. I'm not much for words, but privilege to work for the city of Minnesota about it. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for the support. Sheriff Department, everybody else that helped us provide this guys. It's a big problem. I don't know if you remember seeing us at part of the probably took a few minutes to feel that. It was. So we were in the right place at the right time. It was pretty cool. Glad we're here. Deputy Gantz here is telling Deputy Fish, hey, just a few words, cut it off. But they both did real well because they said who their favorite sheriff is. I'm going to turn it over to Sherman. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Caruana. needed. More than ever, we need to do that. Go do that. All right, now I'm going to read a proclamation. Marijuana is up here, and Mr. Thompson, you want to call the others up, please? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. This is a proclamation in recognition of the National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, April 11th, 2021 through April 17th, 2021. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services. And whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical services is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our police officers, firefighters, emergency medical services is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Winnebago County Emergency 911 Communications Center. And whereas the public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the single vital link for our police officers, firefighters, emergency medical services by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety telecommunicators of Winnebago County have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during their performance on their job in the past year. Therefore, be it resolved that the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee recognizes the week of April 11, 2021 through April 17, 2021 to be National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in Winnebago County in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep the county and our citizens safe. Mr. Earl, would you like to say a few words first before I present the proclamation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer to Mr. Aaron Booker, who is there. I think that would work out better.
Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, these are really the unsung heroes. We look at our police and fire out on the street as heroes, but these men and women that work in the 911 telecommunications center really, they don't get the recognition that they so rightly deserve. I've worked there. I've worked with them. They are at times giving advice over the phone. They most importantly, they give first aid over the phone. A choking baby, a heart attack. They have a book and they talk people through emergency situations. And their emotions and their feelings are just like any of ours. There's times that when they're finished with a call, they go to a side room or a back room and they have to let it out. The emotions just come running out. They do take their work home with them. They live with these issues, and they're also the life-saving connection for officers and firefighters out on the street. They they are our angels at times. So it's great to have the recognition week that they so rightly deserve. So thank you all very, very much for your sacrifice. That they work weekends and holidays. They miss their kids' birthday parties and Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings. So just like the rest of the heroes on the street. So it means a lot to us, and they deserve a big round of applause. And if you see them at a restaurant, gas station, yeah, sure. Walk up to them, shake their hand, pat them on the back, and tell them thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Sheriff Caruana, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chairman. I do. Like Mr. Booker said, these are the unsung heroes. These are the voices behind the radio that when you have situations that are occurring in seconds, they're concerned. They're concerned about the deputy. They're concerned about people on the street. Accident victims, a situation that we had the other night when a domestic violence. We were very, very concerned. I got a call from one of them crying and trying to explain to me what was happening. These are the people that are at a moment's notice, a second, fractions of seconds, of dispatching and following up and making sure everybody's okay. And sometimes we forget about them. So I'm glad that we have this national recognition of talent communicators week. And again, they're very unsung heroes. They're the people that we don't see. So I'd like to extend my warm, heartfelt love for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we're going to have a presentation by Mr. Rickard, our CFO, on the capital improvement plan. Mr. Rickard, are you prepared? All right, you have the floor.
As you know, it's been quite a while since Winnebago County's had the opportunity to actually have a capital plan, and I'm proud to be part of the team with Ted Thompson and Chairman Cherry to get to this point where we can make this presentation to the board. Capital improvement plan is a tool that organizes good budgeting decisions for large projects and purchases based on goals and resources. Capital improvement plan exists as a supplement to the organization's larger strategic plan. It must always be aligned with its goals, missions, and strategies. The reasons for the capital improvement plan: it's more cost effective to maintain assets than to repair assets. There are liability costs and risks when the work environment is not in good repair. There are also public safety concerns when public areas are not maintained. County staff cannot work at optimal efficiency with poor and malfunctioning on-site equipment. What are the goals of the capital improvement plan? First and foremost, public safety, liability mitigation, repair cost reduction, and employee efficiency. For recommendation for funding of the capital improvement plan, Winnebago County annually receives $4.39 million in host fee funds. Currently, 75% of these funds are spent for economic development, community projects, and assisting nonprofit programs. The amount of drawdown from these programs over the course of the next 12 years will gradually drop down to 45%. This will occur if no new commitments are added. On the proposed capital improvement plan for 2021, the following disbursement is requested for host fee funds and capital projects funds. 2021, we're looking for a $3 million commitment. This request can be accomplished without seeking a bond issue or without incurring additional debt. Also, the host fee fund does not require a 3-month unrestricted fund balance reserve. Budget ordinance is ready and prepared for your consideration. The fund reserve and the fund fee is currently, the post fee is currently $5,293,000. Winnebago County is due to receive over $27.4 million in American Rescue Plan funds in April or May of this year. Also, in addition, another $27.4 million in funds should arrive at for 12 months thereafter. It is anticipated that $6 million of our current capital improvement plan can be transferred to ARP, and this is what we've done. This is why we're only asking for $3 million out of the original $9 million that was initially targeted with the capital plan. And our budget will be prepared later this year for your consideration, deal with the remaining $6 million of cost and any other additional costs and project the county deems appropriate. Before you is the schedule of activities that took place in order to get us to this point. We met initially with Spirit Financial to consider our funding and budgeting options. Capital request forms were sent out to county offices. The initial deadline was set for capital improvement plan requests. Projects were sorted based on suitability for the capital plan and the American Rescue Plan. A SIP presentation with the county chairman and administrator was conducted. A SIP presentation with the finance committee was conducted, with an ordinance passed thereof by them. Finally, the last step in this process will be a SIP presentation with the county board and a SIP budget for your consideration tonight. One thing I want to point out, we had a great discussion with the finance committee considering our capital plan. So there are a few issues I really want to clarify and address. First and foremost, all SIP expenditures must comply with all county purchasing policies. So whatever requirements we have as far as bid structure, county board approval, analysis by staff, appropriateness of expenditure, all those things will still take place like we would with any other county budgetary expenditure. Same thing will happen with the capital plan. It's just another budget that we're going to consider, and all those steps and reviews will take place before an expenditure is approved. Local businesses are also something we want to give consideration to. Obviously, if there's an opportunity to provide a capital program project to a local vendor, that's something we want to give very serious consideration to. We want to focus on helping not only the county, but where we can and where appropriate, we want to help the local community. And also, once again, I can't stress this enough, the SIP priorities begin with public safety. That is first and foremost our plan. SIP expenditures are to maintain mission critical assets. And SIP expenditures will also help reduce liability and improve efficiency. That is the capital improvement plan, and I will now very quickly at a high level go through some of the expenditures, and we'll show you what the breakout is for those. Okay, there are three. I tried to color code this, and I apologize for when I initially sent this out in monochrome because the colors blended together and you couldn't tell one from the other. So the packet I sent out in PDF format, the revised packet, shows all these in the true color, and you can see the actual expenditures, how they're being broken out by designation. And I wanted to be very clear and simple to follow. First and foremost, projects that have no color are currently not assigned. That doesn't mean we don't plan on doing them. That means they may be considered down the road, but in the initial capital plan, in the initial ARP plan, they're not currently being considered. And I'll do more detail when we approach them in the presentation. Projects assigned to the American Rescue Plan are highlighted in orange, and projects assigned to the Capital Improvement Plan are highlighted in blue. So without further ado, I will continue on to these projects. The first request, and this is an ARP request, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, is from Animal Services. I will go to talk a little bit more about this one. We looked at a request for a capital plan. We determined that the ones marked in white pardon me, I went wrong correct this. Okay, I apologize for that. Okay, the first thing is, because the antiquated, torn, and worn out chairs in the juror pool, we've, had a request for $100,000 to replace the chair chairs. That's part of the capital plan. Large plotter printer for the development department, is a request, that's gonna help economic development, happy, and such. Going on the building, facilities and building maintenance, there are a lot of projects. Sean Francis here, he could help answer a lot of these questions, but essentially, there are a lot of mission critical, mission necessary projects related to building maintenance that we're addressing for the county, the capital plan, and they're pretty numerous. So if you have a specific question on a specific item, I would probably defer to Mr. Francis to address those questions. But you can see elevator maintenance, repair sidewalks, replace fire panel, do truck and plow. Going on with another repair of maintenance for an elevator, replace an RTU. Courthouse roof repair, I can't imagine a better use of those funds than repair the roof, because if you don't maintain a roof on a facility, it causes all kinds of problems. Again, elevator, replace fire pump, courthouse repair of sidewalks in various locations. As we recall, there have been some concern with liability issues with maintaining our assets such as this public walkways and stuff. So that's something we want to consider. Obsolete equipment, replacing items that involve a power supply for the county. Repaving a parking lot, replacing plumbing for cells that where the plumbing's obsolete or just repair. Replacing the cooling tower at the Juvenile Justice Center. Then elevator, fire panels, other building maintenance issues. Public safety building. Mrs. White, you're probably wondering why. Public safety building, we do plan, and they're working with a variety of different stakeholders at the county. The plan is still not at the point where we're comfortable making a presentation on it. That itself, the public safety building will be its own presentation down the road. Like I said, when we feel comfortable and we've got the routes and steps necessary to formulate a plan, we'll bring it before the finance committee and then the board for your consideration. But right now, we're not quite there at the public safety building. Once we are there, we'll bring it for your consideration. Again, more building issues. Replacing that inner walkway patios at the nursing home. Replace steam kettles and gas-fired steamers. We're going out to the highway department. Carlos is probably the most frugal department head I've ever met. His needs are very basic needs for the facility and maintenance issues for his office. So these are the things he requested. IT, you're probably wondering why IT is almost all, matter of fact, it is all in orange. A lot of the IT improvements would qualify, we believe, for ARP funding, and that's where we want to put it. If we have an opportunity to spend federal dollars, we want to spend federal dollars before we spend $20. It just makes more sense to do that. And where possible, once again, we're trying to shift what we can into the ARP budget. Memorial Hall has a lot of taken in whole a significant amount of money, but individually, these are minor maintenance issues that have to be addressed now. If we don't address them now, they become major maintenance issues, which is why they're being addressed at this point. A couple of other things for court services: a desk chair replacement, vehicle replacement for probation. For the purchasing department and mail machine, as you can imagine, everything revolves around being able to receive and process mail and send mail out for the county. So replacing that mail machine is critical. It's at the end of a useful life. We're going to River Bluff. A lot of River Bluff expenditures, we believe, that don't qualify under ARP because they're either directly or indirectly COVID related. So there's a lot of opportunity on those issues. The sheriff has numerous budgetary issues and capital requests to address where possible, and when we can, we want to shift those over to the budget. But there are a couple of things we don't believe would qualify for ARP, so we're putting it in the capital plan. First and foremost is a hardware replacement. It's a live screen hardware replacement option. I believe this has to do with electronic fingerprinting so they can process prisoners more efficiently into the system. And then at the jail, it involves a purchase of 25 ballistic vests in the jail that costs $25,000. And like I said, we will come back later on in the year. We have some very significant ARP expenditures related to public safety. Going on to the state's attorney's office, as much as we tried a significant number of purchases for the state's attorney, we believe weren't appropriate for ARP, and so we covered them with the capital plan. The state's attorney is making do with really some antiquated equipment, and we have to remember these are high value employees, so we want to maximize their utility for the county. It always makes sense by the tools they need, job. So that's what we're trying to do for the state's. And again, the state's attorney has a need for 2 vehicles related to the assigned investigators. These would probably not fall into ARP, so we're going to use with the capital. And last but not least, my favorite office, the county treasurer's office. The treasurer needs a new letter opener to open up those tax bills so we can process all those tax payments for the tax district. So we're looking to replace that machine that our county treasurer business. That concludes the presentation, and at this time, Mr. Chairman, if I have any questions, I'd be very happy.
Thank you, Mr. Ricker. Is there any questions? County board members? Mr. Tassoni?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess Mr. Ricker
Correct. The blue would be the capital plan. Orange, we're going to push off the ARP. I wanted to demonstrate how we shifted those over because they originally all would have been in the capital plan.
So that when you say capital, it identifies what is basically by
Correct. The blue colored ones are host people.
Any further questions? County board members? Amen. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
presentation. Mr. Thompson, do we have any public hearing? Any public participation? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Before we move on, I want to recognize former board member Gary Jury is here this evening. He's the newly elected Harlan Township Supervisor. Welcome. Okay. Mr. Westcott. Long time. All right, very good. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our agenda. Number 6 is the approval of minutes. A is the approval of March 25th, 2021 minutes and the layover of April 8th, 2021. I have a motion. Motion, Mr. Huffman, and a second by Ms. Crosby. Hard for me to look both ways, so sorry people on Zoom. Just shout out what you need to be heard. All right, is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none. Clerk Gummer, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, would you like to remind the board members that as long as we are conducting a board meeting in hybrid, we will be doing a roll call on all.
Yep, exactly what Clerk Gummer said.
Thank you. We will start with Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Village is on his way. Mr. Booker, Mr. Vitita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby. Ms.
I believe she's on Zoom.
Did you join us, Ms. Sellers?
Yes, I'm having a great deal of difficulty hearing. Yes, I approve the minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. That is 19 yes and 1 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Gamal. Minutes are approved. Number 7 is the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Mr. Arena motions to approve. Mr. Lindmark seconds. Mr. Labor seconds. Is there any discussion? The consent agenda. Hearing none, Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Village is still absent, Mr. Booker, Mr. Vitita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Sellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. 19 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Gamal. Consent agenda has been approved. Move on to appointments. Per county board rules, the county board chairman appointments require a 30-day layover unless there is a suspension of rule. This evening, we have 2 appointments that have been laid over 30 days. So if the county board chooses, they can vote on those 2 tonight. I will read those 2 after I announce the other 3 or 4 nominations for other boards. The first is the Community Action Agency Board. I'm appointing Dorothy Red, our county board member. That is a new appointment. That is from April 2021 to April 2022. The second is the 911 Emergency Telephone System Board. That's Mr. Don Carlson. That is a reappointment. From April 2019, that was supposed to be done in April 2019 to April 2022. Third and not last, at least, is the Board of Review. Jay Douthard is a reappointment. He is a current Board of Review member that I'm reappointing. And the new appointment is Pamela Cunningham. So I put those up before you to lay over, but the others, B is North Park Public Water District Board. That was laid over on March 11, 2021. And that is for Brett Herbie. Second is Harlem Roscoe Fire District Board. That's Mr. Albach Sr. So what would the board like to do this evening for those 2 appointments? So Mr. McDonald approves, motions to approve. Ms. Crosby, Ms. Labors, Westcott are second motion. Is there any discussion on those 2 appointments? Hearing none, Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Neighbors. Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Sellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. That is 19 yes and 1 absent.
Thank you. Those new appointments are approved. Others will be laid over for 30 days. We will move on. Well, Mr. Ricker, can you add a new microphone to the capital improvement plan? Mr. Chairman, I hear myself cutting in and out. That's usually my ears and not the microphone. So we move on to number 9 is the reports of standing committees. First is Finance Committee. Mr. Salgado, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has 3 items tonight, but all of them are to be laid over. So I'm going to just read them in, and then we'll go through it. So the first item is an ordinance providing for the creation of the capital improvement plan budget, and that's to be laid over. The next item is a resolution supporting Senate Bill 1721. This is to be laid over as well for the next meeting as things have transpired. And those can speak to it who have more information on it, but there's developing things coming aboard. Item number 4 as well, resolution opposing Senate Bill 2278 is also going to be laid over for our next meeting as well. And that's all we have for the Finance Committee. If anybody wants to, Mr. Arena, if he wants to add more context to the resolutions for 3 and 4, certainly you can express those, but for now, we're going to lay those over until next meeting.
Mr. Salgado, Mr. Arena, you have the floor. From the various parties, representatives of a firm that does this type of work, it's his opinion that the opinion of people in the business is that the result of the legislation to be to bring less properties to the private sector tax dollars, more properties into the program. It'll reduce the revenue to the program from redemption interest, but possibly increase revenue from sales. It's supported now by Cook County, by some local interests, City of Rockford. It's opposed by private tax dollars. So it's on the floor of the Senate. Personally, I don't know long-term what it's going to do to us, to our program. I spoke with the lobbyists for Cook County. They support it because of the additional language, making it clear that they could maintain properties, which is something we've already been doing. My one concern with it is that it's going to reduce our revenue that we're using to maintain those properties. The second one, Senate Bill 2278, and we spoke about it on Monday, it had been amended then to say that the county board would have authority to decide how the mental health board functions. After our meeting, it was amended again to basically state that the mental health board that we have established under the sales tax will operate under the same rules and regulations that a mental health board that's established, that they typically refer to as a 708 board. From my perspective, that's what I believe we were doing all along anyway. So I would be supportive of this resolution. So we have, as they're presented here, 1721, we have this resolution before us supporting that bill. That I'm unsure of because I don't really understand the impact on our budget. And resolution opposing Senate Bill 2278, I actually personally now favor that bill. That we support it if we're going to take action. I don't know if it's necessary for us to take action. You know, any other board member feels differently to go ahead and move forward, but otherwise I'm fine with the layover. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Arena. Any other board comments?
No, that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, that concludes your report, Mr. Salgado.
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Salgado. We'll move on now to the zoning committee. Mr. Jim Webster. Already on his way.
The zoning committee has two items this evening. First one is for a layover. It's a map amendment, C0221, and that's to rezone 24.66 acres from ag priority district to the general commercial district. And this is in County Board District 8. So this is in for layover. But in the interim here, please do your due diligence and look at the minutes of the meeting, both from zoning board of appeals, and there'll be some forthcoming minutes also from the zoning committee. So that's in for layover. The next item there is a resolution calling for the governor and the General Assembly to protect local control of zoning and land use issues with regard to commercial wind power energy facilities. This is Senate Bill 1602. So what this does is it keeps control of our zoning decisions pertaining to the wind farms in our control, local county control. I can tell you this, that this resolution or very similar one to it is going through the counties right now. Our neighboring counties, Boone County, DeKalb, Stevenson, Ogle, and Whiteside have all approved this resolution or one very similar to it. Over 25 other counties have approved this resolution as well. And from what I understand, 20 others that have resolutions in the courts right now. So ask you for your support on this. We vote on this evening.
You move to approve, Mr. Webster.
Yes, sir. So I move to approve this resolution.
Mr. Webster moves to approve. Mr. Neighbors seconds. Okay. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Hearing or seeing none, Clerk Gamal, could you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster,
Yes.
Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. That's 19 yes and 1 absent.
Thank you. The resolution is approved. Mr. Webster, does that conclude your report this evening?
Yes, only except to announce that May 12th is our next zoning committee meeting. I'm sorry, that's the next zoning board of appeals meeting. May 26th is the next zoning committee meeting.
Thank you. What did you, Clerk Gamal, did you say Mr. Billick was on his way?
I
Okay, what we'll do is, okay, with the board, we'll move from economic development to operations administrative. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to kind of yell a little bit. I notice everybody on Zoom is having a hard time hearing. I can be loud. Operations Committee has got 5 resolutions before us this evening. First resolution authorizes the execution of a renewal agreement with Vision Service Plan for voluntary vision insurance, and I so move.
Mr. McDonald moves to approve. Ms. Crosby seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Cassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Village. Oh, hello, Mr. Village. Would you like to join us for the motion on the vision plan? Thank you, Mr. Village. Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes. Yes.
thank you all. We now have 20 yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The resolution has been approved. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with Zero Card for a voluntary supplemental health benefit, and I so move.
Mr. McDonald moves to approve. Anybody in the Zoom world want to make a second? Mr. Girl, seconds. All right, is there any discussion? Hearing or seeing none. Clerk Gamal, could you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Cassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Village, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Sellers, Ms. Sellers,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
thank you all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The resolution has been approved. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with Aura Benefits Program for the Voluntary Identity Guard Plan, and I so move.
Mr. McDonald moves to approve. Mr. Huffman seconds the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Clerk Gamal, could you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Village, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, 20 yes.
The resolution has been approved. Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next resolution for approval
of Winnebago County Board Chairman, proposed vehicle use. I decide upon I'll motion it.
Mr. McDonald, Mr. Booker, Mr. Arena, the rest of the county board, correct? Is there any discussion? Hearing or seeing none, Clerk Gamal, could you please call the roll?
No need for a roll then, Mr. Chairman?
Sounds like they all seconded it in.
Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Village, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Heller,
Yes.
Earl,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Mark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Pistoni. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The resolution has passed. I believe we have to pay for a vehicle.
Can you help pick it out?
Mr. McDonald,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The final resolution to approve telecommunications service contract, and I so move.
Mr. McDonald moved to approve. Mr. McCarthy has his hand up for second. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, Clerk Gamal, could you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Start with Mr. West. Mr. Arena, Mr. Village, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Sellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Webster. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the resolution has been approved. Mr. McDonald, does that conclude your report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. All right, we will jump back to Economic and Development Committee. Mr. Village.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize first and foremost for I was on the Zoom meeting, but I figured it'd be a little bit easier for everyone to hear everything that I need to say if I came here. So I appreciate your guys' patience. Tonight, the Economic Development Committee has one resolution authorizing the chairman of the Winnebago County Board to execute a redevelopment agreement by and between the County of Winnebago, Illinois, and Venture One Development LLC for Project Sawgrass, and I so move.
Mr. Village moves to approve.
Second.
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 Red.
Second.
Speller, second.
Dorsey, Red, second.
Red, second. All right. I think the whole county board second. Again. Mr. Village, do you have any discussion on this item?
No, I'm just, I would like to say though that for the importance of the county and our development that we do in that region, especially as far as Bachelor Road area, where we've been working on making that buildable and to progress the county and bring more jobs and more economic development to the area. I feel that this is a very awesome thing that we could be a part of, so we can actually bring more industrialization to our area to help us benefit with job creation.
Thank you. It definitely is a big deal. Is there any other discussion by county board members? Hearing and seeing none, Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Arena, Mr. Village, Mr. Booker, Mr. Utita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Sellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. 20 yes.
Thank you. Mr. Village, I'm sure that concludes the report.
That concludes our report, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Okay, we will move to the Public Works Committee. Mr. Tassoni.
Good evening, everybody. Public Works Committee has 3 resolutions on the agenda this evening. The first item would be Resolution 21-008. It's a resolution authorizing the award of a bid for expansion joint repair on Meridian Road Bridge over the Pocatonico River at a cost of $22,000. I would so move.
Mr. Tassoni moves to approve. Mr. Kelly and Mr. Huffman seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, Clerk Gamal, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Village, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni,
Yes.
Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena. Thank you all. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second resolution is 21-009. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of a local public agency agreement with Willett Hoffman and Associates, Inc., and the appropriation of the local share of funds to provide construction engineering services for the rehabilitation of Alpine Road Bridge over Forest Hills Road. It's at a cost of $320,758. I believe.
Tassoni moves to approve. Mr. Webster seconds. Is there any questions from the county board members? Hearing and seeing none. Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni,
Yes.
Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Village. 20 yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The resolution has been approved. Mr. Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our final resolution is resolution 21-010. It's a resolution rescinding 21-005 that was previously awarded and awarding a bid for mowing and vegetation control I would move and support as well.
Tony moves to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Girl seconds. Mr. Kelly seconds. Mr. Tassoni, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for a little brief history on this, it was a few weeks back, a low bid was awarded and the company rescinded their bid. So our recourse was to go out for the second highest bidder, $2,000 more for mowing and weed control in our parkways. And I believe that specific company has been placed on our irresponsible bidder list.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Is there any questions for the county board members? All right, hearing and seeing none. Gemma, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers,
Yes.
Mr. Girl,
Yes.
Mrs. Gorel,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Delgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni,
Yes.
Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker. Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, 20 yes.
Thank you, Clerk Gemma. The resolution has been approved. Mr. Tassoni, does that conclude your report?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. Move on to the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee. Mr. Girl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do not have any items to be voted on this evening, but we did hold a meeting last night. We had 3 discussions. One was an update from our CJCC coordinator, Marlena Dockin. She presented to the committee exactly what she's working on. I know she has only been here for a few weeks now, but she's really working intentively to enact programs such as focused deterrence to help with our probationers and our parole and probation, and also to help with re-entry programs. So exciting stuff coming from our CJCC. Also, we did have a discussion last night with our state's attorney, Jay Hanley, about gun prosecution, state versus federal. And it was really interesting to hear from our state's attorney exactly how that process works. And unfortunately, Mr. Webster probably didn't get the answers that he wanted, but it was really refreshing to hear the truth and exactly what is going on in that office. And Mr. Hanley, our state's attorney, is enacting programs to work with our our federal prosecution to hear more of these cases, to take more of these gun cases away from our local state's attorney and prosecute those. So it is a work in progress, but it is a good step forward. So I look forward to hearing more from our state's attorney, and I'm sure our county board does, on just exactly what he's working on as far as gun and felony gun crime. So that was nice to hear. Also, we did have a presentation from Mr. Jakeway from our courts, and we are working on a IGA with the state of Illinois, specifically Child and Welfare Services, Child and Family Services, to actually recoup some attorney costs when we prosecute and defend children, juvenile individuals. We will be recouped some of our costs that are associated with representing those individuals that could equate up to about $178,000 a year that we could receive through this IGA. So more to come on that. And that is all. If Mr. Booker has anything to add, I'll defer to him.
Oh, Mr. Webster would like the floor.
Please.
Yes, thank you. And Kurt, you mentioned that Mr. Hanley presented to us how the prosecutions work. I think that should be reworded to how the prosecutions don't work, because I'm referring to the federal laws. The federal law, the federal government made a law that felons with a gun, if they get caught, a felon with a gun, it's automatic, mandatory, minimum of 5 years. And the federal government does not step up and take care of the prosecution of a law that they created. And I will keep repeating this until we get somewhere on this. The federal government made a law that you can't rob banks. If you're a bank robber, the federal government steps in right now. They don't defer that to the locals. If you're a tax evader, the federal government doesn't defer that to local prosecution. The federal government made the laws. The federal government needs to step in. He gave us a number that I don't have it specific, but I believe it was 59 arrests, and 2 of them, feds took over on a federal prosecution of a felon with a gun. That is very sad commentary how our federal government is failing us. So they left that on the hands of us locals here do the prosecution, costing us tens of thousands of dollars a year because the feds are failing to do their job. And I will keep hammering on this every chance I get, and I will keep reminding Mr. Hanley that I would like to see him keep the pressure on the feds. When he came on board, he spoke to a large gun club that I belong to, several hundred men. That's one of the things he told us, that because of his background with the federal government, that he would probably make some inroads on this. And, you know, I want to see it happen. And the other thing is, he did tell us that if he had 2 more people there, he could get them appointed to some arm of the federal government, the federal prosecutors, to work directly with them, directly on gun charges. Am I correct on that? Bert? Okay, so I know we got our capital plan. I know there's probably some money in there somewhere. But if he comes, and he indicated that he is going to come to us for a budget amendment. I heard that out of his mouth last night as well. Now, if he comes to us with the budget amendment, and it is specifically to hire 2 people who are going to be working out of the federal courthouse with the federal government people there to prosecute specifically gun laws, I'd be okay with that. I think you can sense my frustration on this, and I've been frustrated on this for 20 years or more. The feds make laws that they won't uphold. It's disgusting. We did that here. If we made laws locally here, and people broke our laws, we'd be jumping up and down and screaming. I think we should all be doing that now. Don't get me wrong. I'm all in favor of lawful gun ownership. I have done my entire life. Not for a felon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would definitely highly recommend everybody go back and watch the Judicial Committee meeting on YouTube. It's a very good meeting. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero, for that. And all the hard work that everyone's doing in these committees. Okay, does that conclude your report, Mr. Guerrero?
It does, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that concludes all our committee reports, right? Okay, we'll move on to number 10, which is unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business before this evening? Hearing none. Number 11, new business. Is there any new business in front of the board? Mr. Lindmark.
A number of constituents before the displeasure with conversation through the village of Rockville, White School Road, levy, they're annexed it in. I understand they don't have authority. If that happens, the 5.5-hour meeting Tuesday, and numbers keep changing. County board, people who live in the county board in my district are really frustrated, and it's frustrating to me to not be able to help them. So anything we can do, even make a statement for the village of Roscoe or to the constituents
try to help them. What's wrong what they're doing, this venue's going right next to a public neighborhood, two neighborhoods actually. They don't have any fire capacity numbers firmed up. No bathroom codes for how many people they can have. They have 75 parking spots. They want 300 guests there. 75 parking spots. I would ask Mr. Thornbush, is there anything you can do, is there anything we can do to help the constituents in Mother Creek?
Dornbush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as opposing, we always go to the hearing for the annexation and speak out of that. As far as numbers of bathrooms, parking lot facilities, that's typically determined by zoning, which if they do get annexed, that would be Village of Roscoe zoning. So you can go to that. Probably won't be the same open hearing, Board of Appeals hearing for the annexation, some of those requirements, but that goes there. You can still speak as a board, as a county board representative. You can object to it. However, it won't force the entire vote on the village for annexation. And certainly reach out to the village trustee who represent that area. Discuss that.
I've done several of those things, and constituents have too, and they're getting no replies. So it's very frustrating for them. I think us as a county, for something like this to happen, I know they can do it on you, the board, but it's terrible what's happening to people with no value. Employees are going to occur. There's no set number to present to the board, and they just run it through and we're Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn, is there any direction you can give to Lindmark to move the county board with the resolution, with a non-binding resolution, anything? Please send the message.
I actually really suggest
I think it's worth at least attempting. Would you work with Mr. Lindmark on a resolution?
That would be very helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Webster.
Pointed out, this happens more often than you realize. I've got a number of calls from constituents as well. The zoning office got a number of calls as well. But again, this happens more often than you think because people want to, they have an idea of what they want to do something. And so they come down, talk to our zoning officers, to this as well, and they say what they want to do, but then when they find out what our code tells them that they have to do, restrooms, the parking, so forth like this, they think that's too onerous. They don't want to do that. And so then they ultimately say, well, what's my options then? So then being people with them, we tell them that, well, your other option is you can annex to the village. Because the village, you're close to, you can annex to that village. What's that going to do for me? For them to play by their rules instead of the county rules. So sometimes that's what they do. Then they jump ship and they get annexed to that village or town or whatever. Other times they find out that that village has stricter regulations than the county does, so then they come back to us and go, okay, we need to do, we did. It's true. So that's very interesting, the annexation business. So be careful with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question possibly for Ms. Vaughn. If the operation, this business would be annexed, it's just the property that the business is on, the road access to the business is county road. So if the operation of this business over time creates problems for us in terms of traffic problems or behavior problems that involve the sheriff's department having intervening and imposing greater costs on us. Do you have any recourse against Roscoe for causing that financial impact on that particular?
Ms. Vaughn?
That's something I would have to look into.
It was pointed out to me that these are small county roads. They're looking at holding events there that come to people. I can see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Is there any other new business in front of the board this evening? Mr. Billich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the animal services. There was a constituent that had an issue and she mistook me for being in that district. She happened to get a hold of me though. I wasn't in Mr. Westcott's district and they were quick to resolve that issue. It did take a little bit of reaching out and then also having to discuss with her. One thing I would urge many board members, if you do get the call as far as a wild animal goes, if it's something that's in regards to a critter, it's not technically something that falls under the department to handle. They were quick to respond. They'll get over there and actually get her connected to a critter removal service. So I do want to give a special thank you and shout out to them for that.
Thank you, Mr. Billich. Is there any other new business? Can't see the Zoom world. Anybody on Zoom, any county board members have any new business?
Nope, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll move on to announcements and communications. Lori Gamow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence, and I do want to wish everybody a happy Earth Day.
Ooh. Very good, Clerk. Is there any announcements or communications from board members? Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to congratulate my predecessor on the board, Gary Jury, for his win as a Harlan Township Supervisor. He was a great mentor to me in my time before I served on this board and after I've been here. He's been a dedicated public servant for many years. And I want to thank him for his willingness to continue to serve the public. I think that people of Harlan Township are fortunate to have him as their new supervisor. Congratulations to you.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Mr. Jury, would you like to stand? Everyone can see you. All right. Any other correspondence from board members? Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that I'm glad to be back here in person again. It feels like we're actually doing good business. We're not sitting in kitchens and basements and porches. I think it's great that we're all here together. Hopefully the rest of our members from Zoom feel safe to come and join us soon, but thank you very much for putting this on.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Westcott. That's a nice clock. Mr. Kelly. Okay, any further correspondence? I did want to mention that Saturday, April 24th is the Great American Cleanup. So I urge all citizens to join in cleanup projects throughout the county. And remember to work every day to keep our community clean, green, and healthy. Thank you. I heard Mr. McCarthy brought cake. Is that true? Oh, sorry. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Westcott, you're very quick on that motion. Mr. Kelly and Mr. Hoffman. All right, all in